You know how rappers love to brag about catching bodies in songs? Yeah, most of it's just talk, but every now and then a rapper comes along who isn't just rapping about the streets, like they're living them, and not in a look how cool my car is kind of way. I mean in a look how quickly I can ruin my life kind of way. We're talking about real cases, real victims, real sentences, and today we're running down rappers who actually crossed the line, from music videos to mugshots. We'll start with the big names you probably argued about on Twitter and work our way down to the real monsters, and trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for the last guy, because while the others on this list are famous, this final rapper, he was dropping bodies like it was drinking water. 1. King Vaughn. Alright, so you know how a lot of rappers rap about shootings like they're reading a comic book? Guns, ops, bodies, all in the name of realness. But then you've got King Vaughn. And with Vaughn, the problem wasn't whether his stories were believable, the problem was they might have been a little too believable. Davon Bennett, King Vaughn, came up out of Chicago's O Block. And if you know anything about O Block, you know it's like the Harvard of drill music. Except instead of degrees, the diploma is either prison or a coffin. By his own admission, and you know by what the streets whispered, Vaughn had been in shootouts since before he could legally drive. This wasn't a rapper who occasionally dabbled in crime situation, it was more like a shooter who happened to also be really good at putting rhymes over a beat. He first got locked up for gun possession at 16, but the big case, the one that almost took him out before rap even got started, was in 2014. Vaughn and a friend were arrested for a shooting that left one man dead and another wounded. This was a proper first-degree murder charge. Most rappers would be terrified, lawyers scrambling, career over before it starts. Vaughn, he sat in jail for 3.5 years like it was a long weekend. Charges eventually got dropped due to lack of evidence, and he walked out like nothing happened. And here's the wild part, the day he got out, he basically went straight to the studio. No find myself phase, no moving to the suburbs for a clean start, straight back to the music, which was basically telling the same stories that got him in trouble in the first place. Except now people couldn't tell where the line between rap and autobiography was. His music blew up fast. Lil Durk brought him into the OTF family, and Vaughn's storytelling was different. He didn't just rap, I shot so and so. He gave you character arcs, setting, motive. It was like listening to a crime documentary, except the narrator was also a prime suspect. But even while his rap career was going full speed, Vaughn's name kept popping up in street rumors. And then in 2020, something crazy happened. The FBI, yes, the actual FBI, allegedly linked him to a hit on rival rapper FBG Duck. According to federal documents, the story went that Vaughn allegedly put up $50,000 for someone to kill Duck, then like some kind of mob movie twist, upped it to $100,000 later. Duck got shot and killed in broad daylight in Chicago's Gold Coast. Now, Vaughn was never arrested for this. He died before the case could even get close to him. But when those court papers dropped years later, the internet went insane. Half the people were like, there's no way, and the other half were like, yeah, that tracks. Then came the night that ended everything. November 6, 2020, Vaughn's in Atlanta outside a hookah lounge, and things turn into a full-blown street brawl with rival rapper Quando Rondo's crew. In the chaos, Timothy Leaks, aka Lil Tim, pulls a gun and shoots Vaughn. The whole thing is on camera. 1 minute he's swinging punches, the next he's bleeding out on the pavement. And just like that, 26 years old, career skyrocketing, and it's over. Here's the thing, Vaughn's death didn't stop the debates. If anything, it made them louder. The streets and the internet were split. Some painted him as a drill legend who just couldn't escape the life he came from. Others pointed to those rumors, those court documents, and basically said, this guy was a serial killer in everything but name. Harsh? Sure, but that's the shadow Vaughn left behind. Even now, his name's still in songs, still on t-shirts, still in headlines whenever the FBG Duck case gets an update. And whether you think he was a misunderstood storyteller or the most dangerous man to ever pick up a mic, one thing's for sure, King Vaughn blurred the line between rap fantasy and street reality so well, nobody could tell where one ended and the other began. And if you're wondering how wild this list is about to get, Vaughn's just the starting point. 2. Tay-K. If King Vaughn's story was a rapper who might have had a few bodies, Tay-K's story is teenager who basically speed ran the criminal justice system. Tamor McIntyre, you probably know him as Tay-K, was born in 2000, which already makes me feel ancient. By the time most kids are stressing about driver's ed, Tay-K was already involved in something straight out of a true crime documentary. In July 2016, Tay-K was 16 years old and running with a crew in Tarrant County, Texas. Now the crew decides they're going to rob a 21-year-old named Ethan Walker, but it's not just run in, grab some cash. This was a home invasion, guns, breaking in, zero subtlety. During the robbery, Walker gets shot and killed. Tay-K doesn't pull the trigger, but Texas law has this little thing called law of parties. Basically, if you're involved in a felony and someone dies, congratulations, you're now just as guilty as the shooter. So Tay-K gets arrested, slapped with capital murder charges, and put on house arrest. This is where most people would be like, okay, I'm in serious trouble, let me just chill and let my lawyer work. Tay-K's thought process, nah, what if I just cut this ankle monitor off and go on the run instead? And he actually did it. One day in March 2017, he slices off his tracker, walks out the door, and vanishes. It's like a Netflix miniseries, except the main character has zero plan beyond don't get caught. But here's where it gets even more ridiculous. While on the run, he records The Race. This is not just some throwaway song, it's basically his real-time fugitive diary over a beat. I ain't beat that case, I did the race. Those aren't metaphors. He's literally telling you what's happening. And instead of laying low, he shoots the video too, in broad daylight, while wanted for murder. While skipping around the country, Tay-K allegedly racks up even more charges. In April 2017, prosecutors say he and a couple friends killed a 23-year-old man named Mark Anthony Saldivar in San Antonio. The story is that Tay-K tried to rob him during a photo shoot, shots got fired, and Saldivar was dead in the street. Again, not exactly the hideout in a cabin approach most fugitives take, and that's not even all. Around the same time, there's also a robbery in Arlington where an older man gets badly beaten. The guy survives, but it just stacks more felonies onto Tay-K's plate. Finally, the manhunt ends in June 2017 when US Marshals find him in New Jersey. He's brought back to Texas, and suddenly the race blows up even bigger. People treat it like some outlaw anthem. It's racking up millions of views on YouTube, while the guy who made it is literally sitting in a jail cell waiting for trial. Fast forward to 2019, Tay-K is convicted for Ethan Walker's murder and gets 55 years. That's already a career ender for most rappers, but the Mark Saldivar case is still hanging over him. And in 2025, boom, verdict comes down, guilty of murder again, this time 80 years. Now here's the kicker, the sentences run at the same time, so it's not 135 years total. But let's be real, either way, he's not exactly dropping a mixtape from the free world anytime soon. One of the wildest details from the 2025 trial was testimony from a woman named Joanna Reyes, who was there the night Saldivar was killed. She basically laid out how Tay-K pulled the gun and fired, no hesitation. The defense tried to poke holes in it, but the jury wasn't buying. And here's the dark irony, the race still gets played. You'll hear it on TikTok, in cars, at parties. Most of the people singing it probably don't even realize it's a confession disguised as a banger. And Tay-K, he's 25 years old, sitting in prison with possibly another half century to go before parole is even a thought. When you look at his story, it's almost like he treated being on the run as a marketing campaign, except instead of selling sneakers or hoodies, he was selling a murder case with a soundtrack. And it worked. For a minute, he got the fame, he got the streams, but he also got exactly what the law promised him from day one, a cell. And if you thought a teenage rapper pulling 2 murder cases before 20 was wild, the next guy on this list was already famous before he caught his charge. And his name? Well, it's not exactly subtle. CMurder. You ever hear a rapper's name and think, man, the prosecution's gonna have a field day with that? That's Corey Miller's entire life story. The man literally called himself CMurder and then got convicted of murder. At that point, the nickname goes from street cred to Exhibit A. So rewind to the late 90s. No Limit Records is running the rap game, Master P is the boss, and his brothers Silk the Shocker and CMurder are part of the family empire. Corey's got platinum albums, music videos with tanks in them, the whole New Orleans flex. This was the era of giant CD booklets and album covers so busy you'd think they were Where's Waldo pages. But behind all that, CMurder wasn't exactly living the quiet celebrity life. He kept close to the streets, which was part of his appeal. Fans felt like he was still one of them. The problem? The streets were about to cash in that connection. January 12th, 2002, a nightclub in Harvey, Louisiana called the Platinum Club. It's packed, sweaty, and loud, exactly the kind of place where bad decisions come with your drink order. Among the crowd is 16-year-old Steve Thomas, a high school kid, a big fan of the local rap scene. He and his friends somehow get into the club that night. At some point, there's an altercation. An altercation here means fists, shoving, chaos. Witnesses say it ends with CMurder pulling out a gun and firing. Thomas is shot in the chest and dies. Police zero in on Miller fast. He's arrested, hit with second-degree murder charges. Now normally, when a celebrity's in court, they've got a PR army spinning the story. Not here. The name alone was brutal for the defense. Imagine being a juror and hearing the defendant, C CMurder. You'd have to fight the urge to check if you accidentally walked into an episode of Law & Order Special Rap Unit. The first trial in 2003 actually ends in a mistrial. The second one in 2009 is where things go south. Multiple witnesses testify they saw him shoot Thomas. The jury finds him guilty, and the judge hands down life in prison without parole. But here's where it gets messy. Years later, two of those witnesses come forward saying they lied. They claim police pressured them into saying CMurder pulled the trigger. This kicks off a whole free CMurder campaign, helped along by big names like Kim Kardashian and Monica. Yes, that Monica, the singer he used to date. They frame it as a wrongful conviction, a broken justice system. And honestly, Louisiana courts have a track record that doesn't exactly scream trustworthy. There were questions about how the jury was selected, how evidence was handled, and whether celebrity status made him a bigger target. On the flip side, the victim's family stands firm. They believe justice was served and that all the celebrity noise is just rewriting history. Meanwhile, from prison, CMurder keeps making music. He's recorded verses over the phone, dropped projects, and stayed active enough to keep a cult following. He's basically turned Angola State Prison into the world's least fun recording studio, and it's strange he's one of the few rappers whose career never really died after the conviction. Maybe it's because the case has that perfect storm: famous family, tragic victim, questionable trial, and a rap name that feels like a bad omen. Now, whether you believe he's guilty or not depends on who you ask. If you're from New Orleans and your team No Limit, you might swear up and down he was framed. If you're from Harvey and knew Steve Thomas, you probably see it the other way. Either way, CMurder's name will forever be tied to that night in 2002. And here's the kicker, and remember how I said the name was basically evidence? During trial, prosecutors literally used his lyrics and rap persona to paint him as violent. It's one of those is it art or confession debates. Hip-hop fans argue it's unfair. Nobody thinks Johnny Cash actually shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. But the justice system, they'll happily quote your hardest bars back to you if it helps the case. So now you've got a guy sitting in prison for life, still recording, still with a fan base, still with high-profile people trying to get him out. And if nothing changes legally, he might never see the outside of those gates again. And yet, compared to the next guy, CMurder's story feels almost straightforward, because while he was convicted on disputed eyewitness testimony, the next rapper, his case had evidence. Horrifying, I need to bleach my brain levels of evidence. And unlike the others, there was no debate about whether he did it. 4. Young Geen Ace. If rap beefs were Marvel movies, Jacksonville would be the Avengers franchise. Way too many characters, constant sequels, and someone's always dying. And right in the middle of it all, Young Geen Ace. Ace, real name Keonta Bullard, started blowing up around 2018 with that melodic but street-heavy style. The thing about Ace is, his music isn't some vague I've seen things stuff. It's Jacksonville-specific, name-dropping ops, referencing real murders, and basically doubling as a scorecard for the city's most dangerous beef. His life went from tough to tragic in one night. June 5th, 2018. Ace is leaving a restaurant with 3 friends after celebrating his brother's birthday. A car pulls up and unleashes what can only be described as a military-level barrage of bullets. Over 75 shots. When it's over, Ace has 8 bullet wounds and is somehow still alive, but his brother Trevin and 2 other friends don't make it. Most people would take that as a sign from the universe to move far away and maybe take up gardening. Ace, he gets out of the hospital and goes harder with the music. His first big post-shooting song, Pain, which was basically an open letter to the streets saying he's not backing down. Here's the thing though, Jacksonville rap isn't just rap, it's a running war between crews, and the songs are like diss tracks and obituaries rolled into one. Ace's crew, ATK, has been in a years-long back and forth with KTA and other rival sets. This beef has inspired some of the most disrespectful songs in drill history, stuff so blunt YouTube has taken videos down. Ace himself has never been convicted of murder, but the streets connect him to the chaos like gravity. Multiple people close to him, including fellow rapper Kasu, have been arrested or charged with killings. And Ace's own lyrics don't exactly calm the rumors. He's dropped names of dead rivals in songs. And in Jacksonville, that's not just disrespect, that's basically an open challenge. In 2019, Ace gets arrested on probation violation charges after being caught with a gun. He spends months locked up, but when he's released, the music and the beef just keep building. By 2021, he's dropped Who I Smoke, flipping Vanessa Carlton's 1,000 Miles into a murder roll call so blatant it went viral. Like people on TikTok were dancing to it without realizing the chorus is Ace literally naming dead rivals. That's the duality of Young Geen Ace. To some, he's a survivor with raw talent who turned pain into art. To others, he's just as deep in the cycle as anyone else, trading bars for bullets. And the line between his art and his reality is paper thin. The danger hasn't stopped either. He's been shot at multiple times since the 2018 ambush, and it's gotten to the point where you almost expect to see his name in a headline every couple months. months. The man lives like he's permanently ducking a sniper. Whether you see him as a target or a participant depends on which side of Jacksonville you're from, but one thing's certain, his story isn't done yet. He's still out, still making music, still in a city where a single verse can be a death sentence. And next, we're crossing the Atlantic for a rapper whose rise was pure joy, until his name ended up in a French murder trial. 5. MHD. If this list was a movie, MHD's story would be the wait, how the hell did he end up here, you part? Because on paper, this guy was the opposite of a street rapper. Mohamed Silla, stage name MHD, basically invented Afro trap in France. Imagine French rap mixed with African beats, catchy hooks, and absolutely zero I'm gonna shoot you energy. This dude's music was all about dancing, partying, and making sure your sneakers stay clean. He had hits, tours, brand deals. Even the French national soccer team vibed to his tracks during the World Cup hype. He wasn't just famous in Paris, he would dance, he was global. So how does a guy like that end up on trial for murder? Well, let's back up to July 5th, 2018. Somewhere in Paris, two rival gangs are beefing. It's the usual city turf war, Kautit. Not drill music levels of fame, but the kind of local feud that gets violent fast. That night, a 23-year-old named Tay-K is ambushed in the middle of the street. It's not a quick shooting, we're talking beaten, stabbed, left for dead. The whole thing is brutal enough that it makes national news. Now here's where MHD's name gets pulled in. Surveillance cameras catch a Mercedes leaving the scene, and it's registered to him. That's already bad. But then a witness says they saw MHD in the group that attacked Loic. According to prosecutors, it wasn't random. Loic was targeted because of the gang war, and allegedly, MHD's crew was deep in it. In January 2019, police arrest him. At first, fans are like, nah, no way, this guy's been on stage with stadium crowds. He's not out here stabbing people in alleys. But then, he doesn't get out. The judge denies bail, and suddenly MHD is sitting in La Sante prison like it's just another tour stop. He spends almost a year and a half locked up before getting provisional release in 2020 while still under investigation. The music industry tries to act like it's business as usual. He even drops an album that does well, but the shadow of that murder case never goes away. By September 2023, the trial starts, and this isn't some quick day in court. There are 9 defendants total, all linked to the killing. Prosecutors paint the picture. 2 cars pull up, group jumps out, they beat and stab Loic, then leave him in the street. Witnesses say MHD was part of the attack, but here's the tricky part. Nobody claims to have seen him actually deliver the fatal blow. The defense runs with that. You can't convict him for just being there, but the prosecution leans hard on association and leadership. They argue MHD was a key figure in the group, that his presence alone carried weight, and that this wasn't some random brawl, it was planned. Combine that with his car being spotted on camera, and the fact that gang wars in Paris aren't exactly solved by polite conversation, and the jury starts looking convinced. The verdict, guilty, 12 years in prison. Not life, but still enough to derail a career completely. Fans are shocked, critics are smug, and the French rap scene suddenly has its own version of rapper convicted for murder headlines that America's been used to for decades. Here's the kicker. In February 2024, MHD gets released under judicial supervision while his appeal is pending. So now he's technically out, but with restrictions, and the case is still hanging over him like a sword on a fraying string. He insists he's innocent, that he had nothing to do with the killing, and that he just got caught up because of who he knows. If you ask his die-hard fans, it's all a setup. Wrong place, wrong time, and the courts wanted a celebrity scalp. If you ask the prosecution, he was a part of a targeted killing, and his fame doesn't give him a free pass. Either way, his career will never be the same. Brands keep their distance, the music he does release gets dissected for hidden meanings, and every public appearance comes with the question, so, about that murder case. And the crazy part, on this list, he's still not the darkest story, because while MHD's case is messy, and while the violence was ugly, the final guy we're about to talk about, his crime wasn't just violent, it was so disturbing, so nightmare level, that once you hear it, you'll understand why I said in the intro, he dropped bodies like it was drinking water, and in his case, it's not even a metaphor. 6th Big Lurch. Okay, I told you to stick around for the last one, and here we are. The others on this list, they shot people, they got into street beefs, they did dirt, but this guy's story is straight up horror movie. No metaphors, no rap bravado, no he might have done it. This is 100% confirmed, no debate. Antron Singleton, better known as Big Lurch, was a West Coast rapper in the early 2000s trying to carve out a lane in this subgenre called horrorcore. Horrorcore is basically rap with themes about violence, gore, serial killers, demons. You you get the idea. Most of it's obviously fake, like watching a slasher flick. The problem? Lurch's life decided to go method acting on him. So flashback to April 10th, 2002 in Los Angeles. Lurch is living with a roommate, a 21-year-old woman named Tynisha Isais. Now, Lurch had been using PCP, and if you don't know about PCP, let's just say it's the kind of drug that turns normal bad decisions into you're going to need a police SWAT team to sort this out. According to the police reports, Lurch had been on a multi-day bender, and when the high hit peak insanity levels, things went from weird to unspeakable. He attacked Tynisha in the apartment, not just attacked, murdered her in a way that still makes seasoned detectives shake their heads. When police arrived, they found her body on the floor, stabbed, beaten, and partially eaten. Yeah, eaten. The autopsy showed she had bite marks on her face, neck, and chest, and parts of her lungs were missing. Detectives later said it looked like Lurch had literally torn into her with his teeth. And where was Lurch when they got there? Out in the street, completely naked, covered in blood, talking nonsense, high out of his mind. Imagine being the neighbor who looks out the window to see that scene. You'd move out before the lease even ended. Now the defense tried to argue insanity, blaming the PCP for making him lose his mind, but the jury wasn't having it. In 2003, he was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial didn't take long. The crime scene photos and forensic evidence pretty much ended the conversation before it started. What's even creepier is how his music suddenly seemed like foreshadowing. Big Lurch had been making these dark, violent tracks, rapping about death and gore. In horrorcore, it's usually performance art, but after the murder, people went back to his lyrics like, oh, was this a warning? And here's the part that makes it even more twisted. Years later, Lurch claimed he'd been set up. He told reporters that he'd been dosed with PCP without his knowledge, and that the people who gave it to him wanted to see him go crazy. Whether that's true or just another chapter in his damaged brain, we'll never really know, but either way, he's never getting out to prove it. In prison, Lurch's case became infamous, not just in rap circles, but in true crime fandoms. It's one of those crimes so over the top that people have a hard time believing it's real, but it is. The court documents, the testimony, the autopsy, it's all there, and this is why I saved him for last. Everyone else on this list might have had complicated cases, contested evidence, even fans swearing they were innocent. Big Lurch? Nah, this wasn't a maybe. This was a man who, on a drug binge, turned into something you'd expect in a horror story. To this day, if you bring up his name in rap discussions, most people don't even talk about his music. They just shake their heads and go, that's the dude who, and trail off, because honestly, there's not a good way to finish that sentence without making everyone in the room uncomfortable. And that's why, when I said at the start he was dropping bodies like drinking water, it's not just that he killed, it's that the whole thing was so brutal, so surreal, that it doesn't even feel like it belongs in the same category as the other rappers here. It's wild how these stories start feeling the same after a while. Different names, different cities, but it's always that same mix, the music popping off, money starting to roll in, and then something from the streets comes knocking like it's got an unpaid debt. Sometimes it's a beef that's been simmering for years finally boiling over. Sometimes it's just being in the wrong place with the wrong people. And sometimes, like we just saw, it's pure madness that you can't explain with logic. One guy turns a murder case into a hit song, another gets his whole career buried under a single night in a club, and there's always that one who somehow survives things no human should walk away from, and yet the ending never changes. Stages get replaced with courtrooms, fans turn into jurors, and the music, it's still playing, though shit just not where they thought it would. What's even crazier is how normal it feels in hip-hop now. We hear the bars, we see the headlines, and half the time we're not sure if it's marketing or a confession, but in these cases, yeah, it was real, every bit of it. And the deeper you look, the more you realize these aren't just one-off tragedies, they're part of something bigger, something that's still going.